Hi, and welcome to Condemned and Happy, a podcast for people experiencing religious trauma and those who care for them. My name is Ray, and I'm a survivor of religious trauma. Kim, who is a pastor in the ELCA, has been reading over the 2025 plan for leadership that can be found on the Heritage Foundation's website.
Before we get into this episode, I need to offer a trigger warning here. This episode talks about violence to transgender youth in school shootings. It was recorded before the school year began. Although I am a pastor, I am first a parent of school-aged children. I am a parent of children who have been bullied in school, on the bus, after school, and who have developed anxiety because of bullying. I am also a pastor who has repeatedly had to preach after yet another school shooting that leaves parents and communities shattered. I have been a pastor for 23 years. I am sick and tired of this totally preventable tragedy repeatedly happening year after year. I call bullshit on politicians and those who claim to follow Christ and wear an AR-15 pin in place of the American flag or next to it. Trauma is not an easy thing to recover from. There is no recovery for the senseless violence and murder of children in our schools. In this episode, you will hear me, a pastor in the ELCA, say some swear words. If that offends you more than a politician who says school shootings are just a fact of life, well, I have nothing to offer you except this. Please repent. If we are more scandalized by a pastor's choice of words that are vulgar than we are by the murder of school children, we don't have the same values, sense of human decency, and Christian faith. I don't know who led you astray, but the Christ I follow doesn't demand empty words such as thoughts and prayers and no action taken on behalf of the least of these, our school children. And now to our episode. They want to make this totally illegal for transgender youth to exist. We've been there. We've seen the harm. Just recently in Pennsylvania, a child by the name of Polly Likens, who's transgender, was brutally murdered, dismembered. 14 years old. Now, I have a 13, almost 14-year-old. I would hate to see my child abused like that. No parent should have to go through this. You know, damn it all. Our kids go to school. We never know if they're going to come home because we have guns all over the fucking place. And now we have kids who are just expressing themselves getting beat up. And if this goes through, it'll just get worse. No parent should be in a position where their child is not safe at school or safe in their neighborhood or able to go around and not get bullied because you didn't teach your kids to live and let live. I'm sorry. It sucks. I have 2 kids who were bullied. I've been through the pain of, oh shit, here we go. Are they suicidal? I have knives locked up in my house. When kids are bullied, it affects the entire family. Because as a parent, you can't just say, oh, shake it off. You know, your kid doesn't want to go to school because they're being bullied. You've got to figure something out. And it's the school's legal obligation to provide a safe environment for your child. And they can't do that if we allow bullying. All right, that's my sermon net for the day, and I'm going to get off my soapbox, but this just frustrates me because I see too many kids who are suicidal. And we have a generation of kids who are already anxious, and the pandemic didn't help, but you know, the last thing you want as a kid, as a parent, is to try and tell your kid, wait another 10 years when your brain finally fully develops and it'll be fine, because a 14-year-old doesn't think 10 years is ever going to come.
Yeah.
You know, you keep telling your kids, it'll get better, it'll get better. But for day to day, they can't see that.
Yeah.
You know, all of our ways of trying to help our kids cope with this stuff is great, but it works better when you're an adult than it does when you're a kid. The
Yeah.
lovely thing about adolescence, everybody's watching me, something must be wrong. The
Mm.
paranoia of your mind, and then you're around some jerk who's like, oh, you're not doing X, Y, or Z. You must be weird or something's wrong with you. And the kid takes it to heart and decides to be impulsive and harm themselves.
And that's not even acknowledging the pressure that comes from online, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever new social media happens to be there.
Right.
Like even if you're in a loving environment, and even if you're not bullied at school, just the pressure from seeing this world that's supposed to be a certain way, feeling that you have to conform to
Right.
this, we have not as a society really had this amount of technology for very long.
Right.
We
And we
don't
don't know how to
know.
use it.
We don't. And so, we do know a little bit about bullying. We've had bullying and children bullying children as long as we've had children.
Yeah.
But we haven't always had this technology. And so our children are against so much more. And it is right to really care about them, but it is wrong to use the terms for caring about them to increase bullying and
Exactly.
to increase harm.
Yeah. And that's what I fear this is really going to do. I mean, when I could go home from school and get away from all the stress of school, you know, now with social media, it's 24/7.
Yep.
And why this is really important to me is gun violence is the number one killer of children. Number two is suicide.
Yeah.
And moreover than not, suicide is because the child has been bullied. You know, some of us, like I was suicidal as a teen. I didn't have any access to any of that. I mean, that's just the fact that my body doesn't produce the right amount of happy chemicals. So I'm very sensitive to this because I know in adolescence, when you're going through the hormone change,
Yeah.
you may not have all the right chemical balances. But, you know, when you add this shit on top of it, it makes it 10 times harder
Yeah.
to parent a kid and say, yeah, you're going to be okay. It's going to get better. It really will get better.
Yeah.
And then when you have people supporting somebody who bullies other people, and that's leadership, that's really hard for sensitive kids.
Yeah.
It's
I
really
mean,
hard on kids who just don't fit the norm.
I think that take us, listen, if you're listening to this and you're in the right wing space, like take a step back and think about what your choice for a leader says about to your children and to the people around you about what you expect in the world. If you want a leader that bullies people publicly and is obnoxious to people, you could say all you want that, oh, the Bible says we should be humble and meek. But if you're not supporting people that are humble and meek, you've given up. You're saying that it's not okay. You're saying that in a certain time and place, oh, we want to bully.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot of unintended consequences for that I don't think people in the right wing space realize. The violent rhetoric that has become normalized in our political world in America right now has real consequences.
Real harmful consequences.
Yeah.
I mean, not just for transgender children, but for anyone who steps out and says, hey, I don't agree with this.
Yeah.
Look at all of the people who have quit being part of the election process
Yeah.
because of death threats.
Yeah.
This is not okay. You can't have a democracy when thugs rule.
Yeah.
And when thugism is normalized. It has to stay as completely unacceptable.
And I think it really one of the things that I think we need to remember is that we can victimize and villainize. Well, we can villainize our opposition. We're very good at that. But if we're not policing our own house, the people
Yeah.
we have direct, say over, there's real consequences to that.
Yeah.
One of the things that really turned me off about when I was more Republican leaning was how violent the rhetoric got and how no one said anything.
Yes.
You can cast blame against the other party all you want, but if you're not holding your own leaders accountable, it says that it's an endorsement of that behavior.
Yes. Silence is consent.
Yes.
In political sentences, it is not consent in sexual relationships. Let's just
Yes.
get that out of there, because
Yes.
we want to make sure people understand the difference.
Yeah.
I find it odd too that people would make these sweeping generalizations about what's legal, what should be legal and not, without ever consulting medical experts. Because obviously none of the stuff that he puts in this huge sentence is medically sound. Let's just eliminate reproductive health. Well, you can't.
Yeah.
Because for women, we need access to reproductive health. Getting pregnant can be life-threatening.
Yeah.
It can be life-threatening to not have medical procedures that clean out a woman's uterus, regardless of pregnancy, because cancer exists in the uterine lining. And that's something that one of the ways you treat that is you go in and you say, oh, no, there's cancer. Let's remove the uterus or scrape it out. And that's technically a D&C.
Mm-hmm.
So when they talk about these, we're going to just say, okay, reproductive health is out. What are you doing? At the one point in time, you want men and women to be men and women. But if you don't give women the access to care they need, you're treating us like men. And you don't want transgendered people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is confusing. I need my own health care and I need it. And I don't want some ignorant guy who doesn't know 90% of what women go through to make laws about what can be treated and what cannot.
And it's really sort of very hypocritical to say that you're pro-life and then against reproductive health care. It's like that's how we protect life in the womb.
Yeah.
It's a large, complicated subject that we all have opinions on that are probably not the best informed. Like we really don't know. And I think that if you really are about freedom, you want the freedom to make the decision that you feel best with and not have it forced on you.
Yes. And, again, when you have people who have certain medical conditions like lupus or spinal bifida, pregnancy may not ever be an option.
Yeah.
And if it happens and puts a woman's life in danger, no one has the right to tell her what to do, in my opinion.
Yeah.
A doctor can tell her your best bet is to do X, Y, or Z, but ultimately she has to make that decision.
Yeah.
And, these are not easy decisions for people.
No.
They're not. It's not something that needs to be approached with legalism, but it is something that needs to be approached with care and compassion.
And there's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
Like we all need food.
Some of us don't need to like it. Yeah. What does that look like? Yeah.
What does that look like? Right? Like, if you're going to force us all to eat broccoli, you're not very freedom loving.
Well, and an example of trying to plan a family reunion when everyone has different food allergies, diabetics, you got to make allowances for that. You can't just say, all right, everyone, you're having cheese. Oh, you're
Yeah.
lactose intolerant. Oh, you're allergic to milk. Oops. Go
Like
eat
there's
grass.
like if you're going to advocate for limited government, perfect place to advocate for limited government. The government doesn't need to be making these decisions. Let people and their medical providers make the best decision and, keep the government out of it. Over a couple hundred years, we'll have good data, right? Like
Yeah.
just let people decide. Say we don't need the government to tell us what to do.
And it's so ironic too, because, they seem to want to dismantle the administrative state and take government out of things, but they're not taking government out of women's health care
Yeah.
where it needs to be taken out of. And they're not taking it out of transgender health care where it's no one's business.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that's so frustrating is like, oh, limited government. For who?
Yeah.
Or it's just with the right wing, I don't know if they really understand that they only want government to work for them and nobody else.
That
And
that's really what it
dangerous.
comes down to, is that they don't
Yeah.
realize that other people exist.
And that other people have a right to exist and may have different experiences.
Yeah.
There are, between my sister and I, we have similar medical issues, but not the same.
Yeah.
And we're, we have the same parents. It's the way the genes, they don't play out the same way.
Yeah.
Well, and it gets really disturbing too, because they say that the Dobbs decision that outlawed abortion is just the beginning.
I mean, it really is for them and their actual goals, I think.
Yeah, they want to, the author says it's only the beginning and that the next president should ensure robust protections for the unborn. And
How about some
again,
robust protections for the born, buddy?
born. Yeah, like, can we have a government that helps us from cradle to grave?
How about no
Um,
lead in the water?
how about no legend? Yeah, exactly. Or in the air.
Yeah.
And he pushes for adoption to be subsidized without addressing how to care for women in miscarriages. Again, it's like, oh, miscarriage doesn't happen. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
He also is not a fan of addressing how to care of public schools. And this is really disturbing because I was taught that having an educated population helps people achieve more and supports our democracy. With
Yeah.
education comes the power to do more and know more. He says that public schools exist to serve parents. And this is frankly impossible.
And they're not doing a very good job of it if they're serving parents.
No. So I'm pretty well educated, but I couldn't tell you the best way to educate an autistic child or a gifted child or a struggling child. We have specialized fields of expertise so that one person is not required to know all this stuff. There simply isn't enough time to become an expert in all areas of society. This author claims he's promoting a culture of life in America again, and that the president should as well, but it's a culture of control and lack of expertise that he is promoting. If we cannot learn about how racism affects 48% of Gen Z, how is that life affirming for Generation Z? And here's what I mean. Generation Z is the most diverse generation in America's history. And 48% of them do not identify as white. So racism is an issue for Gen Z. And that's almost half of our population of Gen Z. And yet, if we're not allowed to learn about systemic racism, how is that going to help Gen Z?
Yeah. I mean, if you
how
want to recruit young people into your company, you're going to have to appeal to them because you don't want to force them to work for you, do you? Is that what this is about? Forcing people to work for companies they don't feel like they belong, or they don't feel like there's anybody like them at?
Yeah. I don't get this. And I get tired of hearing people my age and older say no one wants to work in America again. It's like, well, pay people. But if you make your workplace hostile,
Yeah.
no, that doesn't help.
Yep.
He says we cannot have a government that raises one group above another, but that is precisely what systemic racism does. We've already seen that what having a miscarriage and no access to abortion has done to women who have lost their lives or their fertility in this country. How is that promoting a society of life for women and girls?
Yeah, it's a lot of head in the sand. We just want what's best for us to
It's
apply it
extremely
to.
frustrating when you're a female.
Yeah. I love the fact that he says public schools exist to serve parents. As a parent of kids in public school, I can tell you it does not. Because if it exists to serve me, it would be longer.
Well, it
It
never
would reflect
has.
actual daycare hours, not
Yeah,
school hours.
but it never has. The point of public school was to give everybody an opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
Because at one point in time, our society felt having an educated populace was better for democracy, was better for our future than having an ignorant one. And
And
we've been in times where people weren't allowed to go to school, or eighth grade was all you had to do. And yeah,
and and to take the strictly capitalistic perspective here, we're in a global economy where
yes,
workers are we're competing for workers and knowledge and skills across the globe. And a lot of other countries are far more educated than us. And that's where a lot of our jobs have gone.
yeah,
Like, if we want to compete, if we want America to be this great powerhouse of economic prosperity, we got to really put our nose in the books and be smarter and more educated and more talented and than everybody else, because it's a global world now, because we believe in free market capitalism.
yeah.
And if
And
you're going to believe in it, you got to be you got to be better. You got to be the best. And
great.
that
You got
comes
to
through
support,
learning.
and you got to support teachers and pay them.
Yeah.
But more than that, too, you got to have parents be able to be home with
Yeah.
their kids and not need to work 4 to 5 jobs to make ends meet. You know, your educators, your teachers should not have to go to the pharmacy and work as a farm tech on the weekends.
Yeah.
You know, they should be able to get paid a decent amount. But so does the person at McDonald's
Yeah.
and everyone else, because, you know,
I,
when we
I,
have an economy that only works for the wealthy, the rest of us are too traumatized and hungry to have the time to help our kids with their education.
and I mean, like, that's the thing that, like, I think really turns people off. If I were to make a appeal to the right of America, it's like, actually do things to show that you care, right? Like, if you
Yeah.
care about children, make sure education is good. Make education great again. Make make after school programs that are free and go into the places that have poverty and help people. Like, do things to help. Even just pretend.
Well, and accept the fact that history is real
Yeah.
and there are parts of it you don't like. And maybe your family was on the wrong side of the Civil War,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean you need to try and rectify the Civil War's outcome.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean, move on.
all of our ancestors have done bad things in the past, and we've learned from them. And if we don't want to learn from them and we want to continue the same mistakes, we were no better than them,
Right.
and we're no better off than them.
Right. And if we want our kids to have a future, we need to understand science.
Yeah.
Even if we don't understand it, freaking accept the people who are telling you that the world is ending, that, you know, we've already had the hottest day in world record in the history of the earth. Okay. Do something.
Yeah. This is a lot to think about. This is just the first point of the promise of America. It's kind of a bleak promise if you're gay or care for a friend who is LGBTQ plus. It's a bleak picture for parents whose kids want to be their authentic selves and serve and need gender affirming care. And it's a bleak picture for women in labor when pregnancy goes wrong, or for rape or incest victims. This picture is one that I was raised in, and it is not a positive worldview to have. It's very oppressive. You feel like everybody is against you, and it does not help if you have any sort of mental illness. It's definitely traumatizing to be in it, and it's traumatizing to see it. And my hope is that we don't have to experience this and there's less trauma in the world.
There's one thing that Ray and I agree on. Well, there's a lot we agree on, but one of that would be, can we just stop traumatizing people, please?
Yes.
Because right or left of things, being in trauma is not fun. Being
Yeah.
traumatized is not fun. So if we could figure out a way where right and left, we could say, hey, this is less traumatizing, maybe we should do it.
And traumatized people hurt other people.
Yes.
Traumatized people are not good members of society. They are often in situations that require need and use. And if we want people to be happy, healthy, and prosperous, in whatever sense of the word we mean by that, we need to avoid traumatizing people, because that is one of the things that prevent us from truly living our best lives.
Yes. And there is also hope for people who have experienced trauma, because it does
Yes.
not need to be a cycle that is repeated.
Yes.
Therapy helps. Mindfulness helps. All kinds of meditation. One of the things that I have found really helpful is understanding that when Jesus said, pray for your enemies and do good to those who harm you, is he's not telling you to be a doormat. It's a part of meditation. When you pray for gratitude and good things to happen to people and to yourself, you are helping your brain release its healing effects. When you pray for kindness, when you meditate on kindness, especially after something that's been harmful to you or a harmful memory, you think about kindness towards yourself, you're actually starting your brain towards healing yourself. And that's kind of like scientifically proven with brain imagery.
Yeah.
So we don't need to be repeating the past. We don't need to be harming other people, but we can be mindful of how our actions affect others.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us today for our continuing look at the 2025 Plan for Leadership. This episode focused mainly on pages 3 through 6. As you can see, this vision put forth in this plan is one conservative right-wing Christians have had for decades. It's not necessarily a return to a time in America that has ever existed, but one of a fevered dream. Okay, maybe it existed pre-Civil War South.
I don't know. I wasn't there.
Okay, maybe it existed in the pre-Civil War South, but is it the future we have in store for us? Do we want to dismiss the medical advances that can save lives? Do we want to have a country where LGBTQ plus persons are erased and have their rights taken away? Do we want to have a country where the right to women's reproductive health care is excised from the annals of public policy? Do we want a country where one branch of Christianity has a superiority over all branches of Christianity and over all other religious expression in our country? The choice is yours. Your vote decides. Your feedback is always welcome. You can reach us via email at condemnedhappy@gmail.com, or you can check out our blogs, Condemned Happy at Blogspot, or on WordPress as Condemned and Happy. Have a great week.